back. Most relationships don't end because of lack of love. They end because of toxic mindsets we refuse to admit we have. It's not the big betrayals. It's the silent killers: entitlement, avoidance, control, and ego. These four destroy trust faster than any outsider ever could. And the harsh truth: if you don't confront them in yourself, you'll carry the same poison into every connection you touch. So if you're brave enough, back. Let's talk about the mindset that might be destroying your relationships right now. When you walk into a relationship carrying the mindset that someone owes you, you've already poisoned the foundation. Back. The moment you expect them to constantly fill your needs, you've stopped seeing them as a person and started treating them like a service provider. This entitlement is subtle at first. Back. It creeps in when you expect them to always text first. It shows up when you want them to read your mind instead of communicating your needs. It grows when you measure their actions against your unspoken standards. Over time, the relationship shifts from connection to transaction. The giving disappears. The keeping score begins. The problem with entitlement is that it convinces you love should feel effortless. Back. It whispers that if they cared enough, they would just know what you need. That's a lie. Nobody is born with a manual on how to love you perfectly. People learn through communication, not through assumption. Back. But entitlement blinds you from seeing your own responsibility. You stop showing appreciation because you think their efforts are just what they're supposed to do. And without appreciation, back, even the smallest acts lose their impact. Entitlement doesn't just kill gratitude, it replaces it with resentment. Think about how damaging it feels to give to someone who never acknowledges it. You cook, you support it back, you listen, but instead of gratitude, you get silence or more demands. Over time, you stop wanting to give. Why? Because you feel invisible. That's what entitlement does to your partner. Back, it tells them their contributions don't matter unless they meet your exact standards. Eventually, they lose motivation. The relationship becomes lopsided. You expect more while they give less. Back. Not because they don't care anymore, because no one wants to pour into a bucket with a hole in it. Entitlement also creates this dangerous illusion that you're the one being wrong. You convince yourself they aren't doing enough, when in reality, you're refusing to see what they already do. It's a form of self-sabotage. Instead of appreciating the 80% they bring back, you obsess over the 20% they don't. And when you live like that, you will never be satisfied no matter how much they give. That's why entitled people bounce from one relationship to another, always carrying the same complaint. They didn't give me what I deserved. The truth is, they gave plenty, it just wasn't appreciated. Another brutal side effect of entitlement is comparison. Back, you start measuring your partner against someone else's highlight reel. You think, why can't they be more like that person's boyfriend or girlfriend? That thought alone plants seeds of discontent. Back. You're no longer focusing on what makes your partner valuable. You're fixating on what they lack. This not only makes them feel inadequate, but it also makes you blind to their unique strengths. The irony is, take it back. While you're wishing for someone else's qualities, someone else is wishing for the very qualities your partner already has. Entitlement blinds you to blessings. Back. A relationship thrives when both people choose to give without keeping score. Entitlement destroys that balance because it only focuses on what's missing. Back. It trains you to look at your partner like they're failing an exam you designed in your head. That creates a dynamic where you sit in the position of judge, not teammate. And the moment you become the judge, back, the connection breaks. Nobody wants to be constantly evaluated. Nobody wants to feel like they're always falling short. Love cannot survive in a courtroom, and entitlement turns every interaction into a trial. Back. The antidote to entitlement is humility, the willingness to see your partner's effort, even if it's imperfect, the ability to appreciate gestures without demanding more. When you approach a relationship with humility, back, you're able to see the little things as valuable, not expected. You realize love isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Humility keeps you curious instead of critical. Instead of asking, back, why aren't they doing this? You ask, how can I appreciate what they're doing? That shift changes everything because people naturally give more when they feel seen and appreciated. But entitlement also robs you of personal responsibility. It convinces you that the reason the relationship feels unfulfilling is because of what they lack instead of what you refuse to give. You stop working on yourself. Back. You stop asking what you could do better. You only point outward, never inward. But relationships are mirrors. They reflect back the energy you put in. If you bring entitlement, you'll get distance. Back. If you bring gratitude, you'll get closeness. If you bring effort, you'll inspire effort. The quality of a relationship is rarely about one person's failures. It's about how both people show up daily. Back. What entitlement really masks is insecurity. When you feel like you aren't enough, you demand more from others to fill the gap. You think if they just gave me constant attention, back, I'd finally feel secure. But security doesn't come from someone else, it comes from within. By demanding more and more, you end up pushing them away. And the irony is, back, the very thing you fear, being abandoned, is created by your own entitled behavior. Entitlement doesn't heal insecurity, it magnifies it. The only way to feel whole is to take ownership of your own worth back, not outsource it to someone else. Ultimately, entitlement makes love conditional. It says, I'll appreciate you only when you meet my expectations. That's not love, that's a contract back, and contracts are fragile. The moment one condition isn't met, the whole thing collapses. Real connection is built on unconditional appreciation, not constant evaluation back. If you're waiting for someone to give perfectly before you give gratitude, you'll be waiting forever because no partner is perfect back. But entitlement blinds you from seeing that imperfection is exactly what makes relationships meaningful. It's the choice to love someone despite flaws that makes love powerful. Avoidance feels safe in the short term, but it's the silent killer of any relationship. When you choose not to bring up what's bothering you, you create space between you and the other person back. That space doesn't stay empty. It fills with assumptions, resentment, and doubt. You tell yourself you're protecting the relationship by avoiding conflict, but really you're protecting your own comfort back. The uncomfortable truth is that silence doesn't prevent pain, it only delays it. And when delayed, pain grows sharper. The conversation you avoid today becomes the explosion you face tomorrow. Back, what you refuse to confront will always find its way back. Most people avoid hard conversations because they're terrified of rejection. They fear that being honest will make them less lovable back, that speaking their truth will push the other person away. But honesty doesn't destroy connection. Dishonesty does. By holding back, you're not sparing the other person's feelings. Take it back. You're sparing yourself the discomfort of vulnerability. Vulnerability feels like weakness, but in reality, it's strength. It's proof you're willing to risk being misunderstood in order to build clarity back. Avoidance, on the other hand, is weakness disguised as peace. It's a way of hiding while pretending you're protecting. Think about what happens when you don't address an issue. Every time the same problem shows up back, you flinch a little more inside. You smile on the outside, but inside you're keeping score. Your unspoken frustration builds a wall, brick by brick. And the longer you avoid it, back, the harder it becomes to tear that wall down. By the time you finally speak, your words carry years of pent-up resentment instead of calm truth. That's when conversations turn toxic. Not because of the topic itself, back, but because of all the weight you've been stacking on it in silence. Avoidance doesn't just harm the relationship, it harms you. You start living with a constant undercurrent of tension, never fully at peace. You become hyper aware of every little thing they do that connects to the unspoken issue. Small annoyances feel massive because you've attached them to unresolved wounds. And in that state, back, you stop seeing the person clearly. You only see them through the lens of frustration. Instead of dealing with one honest conversation, you end up dealing with hundreds of small triggers that eat away at your patience. Back, avoidance robs you of calm and clarity. One of the most damaging lies avoidance tells is that conflict is dangerous. In reality, conflict is a sign that both people care enough to speak up. Indifference is what kills connection, not disagreement. A strong relationship isn't one without conflict. It's one where conflict leads to growth. But when you avoid, you rob both people of the chance to grow. You deny them the opportunity to understand your perspective, and you deny yourself the chance to be fully known. Avoidance says, back, I'd rather hide parts of myself than risk discomfort. But love cannot thrive in hiding. Avoidance also creates a power imbalance. The person who refuses to speak their truth gives up control of their own needs. Back, they silently hope the other person will magically guess what's wrong. But nobody can read minds. That silence forces the other person to make decisions without full information. Back, and when those decisions don't align with your hidden desires, resentment grows. Suddenly you feel unheard even though you never spoke. This dynamic is unfair. Back, it punishes someone for failing a test they didn't even know they were taking. Avoidance is not kindness, it's sabotage in disguise. Courage in relationships doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. Back, it comes from saying, this is hard for me to bring up, but I care enough to bring it up anyway. That sentence alone requires strength most people avoid. But it's the kind of strength that builds trust. Back, when you're willing to name the elephant in the room, you prove you value the relationship more than your comfort. And trust is built in those exact moments. Not when everything is easy, but when it's hard, back, and you still choose to be honest. Avoidance never creates that trust. Every time you avoid, you train yourself to shrink. You teach your nervous system that speaking your truth is dangerous, so you stay quiet. Over time, back. This becomes your default response. You become smaller in your own life, weaker in your own relationships. You start convincing yourself that your needs are unreasonable or that silence is noble. Back. But silence is not noble. It's self-erasure. By refusing to speak, you deny your own worth. You convince yourself your voice doesn't matter. And once you start believing that, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes a performance. The irony of avoidance is that it never protects what you think it will. You avoid because you don't want to lose connection, but connection is exactly what you lose. You avoid because you don't want to create distance, but distance is exactly what grows. Avoidance promises safety, but delivers destruction. It's like leaving a wound untreated. It may not hurt immediately, but infection spreads silently. And by the time you address it, the damage is far worse than if you had faced it early. Avoidance never saves you. It only postpones the inevitable collapse. The truth is, relationships are built in the messy middle, the place where honesty and discomfort collide. It's in those late night conversations where you stumble through your words but keep trying. It's in the arguments that end with deeper understanding, not in pretending there's nothing to argue about. Avoidance robs you of that. It denies you the intimacy that comes from being fully seen, flaws and all. The people who last are not the ones who avoid conflict, but the ones who use conflict to become stronger. That requires courage. That requires truth. That requires presence. Control feels like security, but in reality, it's a slow erosion of trust. When you try to dictate how someone acts, thinks, or feels, you're not loving them. You're managing them. At first, control looks harmless. You make suggestions that sound like care. You offer help. That's really disguised direction. Take it back. You say it's about making things better, but deep down, it's about making things your way. And when every action is filtered through your approval, the other person stops feeling safe. What was once freedom turns into walking on eggshells. The urge to control comes from fear of being hurt, fear of being left, fear of not being enough. Instead of admitting that fear, you cover it with rules, expectations, and constant monitoring. You convince yourself that if you can just manage every detail, nothing will go wrong. But relationships don't work like that. The tighter you grip back, the faster things slip through your fingers. Control doesn't prevent loss. It accelerates it. It creates tension, resistance, and distance. What begins as an attempt to keep someone close ends with them wanting to run back. Trust is the oxygen of a relationship, and control suffocates it. When someone feels like every choice will be corrected or questioned, they stop sharing openly. They start editing themselves saying what they think you want to hear instead of what's real. That's how honesty dies, not through lies, but through self-censorship. And once honesty disappears, so does intimacy, because intimacy requires truth. You cannot truly know someone who is constantly managing themselves to avoid conflict. Control might give you obedience, but it will never give you closeness. Control also kills individuality. Every person has their own way of expressing love, solving problems, and navigating life. When you try to force them into your mold, you strip them of their uniqueness. You end up in a relationship with your own reflection, not with a real human being. And here's the irony, the very qualities that drew you to them are often the first ones you try to change. What you once admired becomes what you want to manage. But when someone loses their sense of self in a relationship, resentment grows. Resentment always chases control. The cost of control is freedom. Love only thrives in an environment where both people feel free to be themselves. Without freedom, there is no trust. And without trust, love is unsustainable. You may keep someone physically present through control, but emotionally, they're already gone. They build walls to protect themselves from your expectations. They stop bringing their full self to the table. And what you're left with is not partnership, it's compliance. Compliance is not love. Compliance is survival, and no one thrives in survival mode for long. The deeper problem with control is that it shifts the relationship dynamic from collaboration to hierarchy. Instead of being teammates, one person becomes the boss and the other becomes the employee. The boss sets the rules. The employee complies to keep the peace. But no one falls in love to be managed like staff. Relationships require equality, not domination. When one person always dictates, the other slowly loses their voice. And when a voice is silenced long enough, eventually it erupts or disappears completely. Neither outcome leads to trust. What makes control especially toxic is how it disguises itself as care. You say, I just want what's best. But what's best often really means what I want. Care becomes manipulation when it disregards the other person's agency. Real care allows choice. Real care respects boundaries, but control takes away both. It replaces genuine support with pressure. And when someone feels pressured instead of supported, they stop turning to you for help. They start hiding, lying, or seeking freedom elsewhere. Control never strengthens connection. It only fractures it. The alternative to control is acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean you agree with everything someone does. It means you allow them the dignity of being themselves. You recognize that your way is not the only way. You let go of the illusion that you can manage someone into perfection. Acceptance creates space for growth back because people are more likely to change when they feel safe, not when they feel controlled. Control demands compliance. Acceptance inspires transformation. And transformation born from choice lasts far longer than obedience born from fear. Control doesn't just damage the relationship, it damages you. The more you rely on control, the less you develop trust in yourself. You begin to believe you cannot handle uncertainty, that you cannot survive without forcing outcomes. This makes you fragile, not strong. Resilient people know they cannot control others, only themselves. They know trust is built through freedom, not force. But the controlling mindset convinces you that safety comes from domination. In reality, safety comes from adaptability. Control is brittle. Flexibility is power. And love requires flexibility to last. Every time you choose control, you choose fear over love, you choose force over trust. You choose short-term compliance over long-term connection. The choice is subtle but devastating. Because trust cannot coexist with control. The more you demand, the less you inspire. The more you restrict, the less they want to stay. Control may make you feel powerful for a moment, but that power is empty. It's not the power of influence. It's the illusion of authority, and illusions always collapse under pressure. Trust is the only foundation that holds. Ego is the invisible wall that stands between two people who should be close. It whispers that admitting fault makes you weak, that apologizing lowers your value. That compromise means you've lost. But love is not a competition. It's not about who wins or who gets the last word. When ego leads, connection suffers. Instead of listening to understand, you listen to defend. Instead of working together, you work against each other. Ego doesn't allow you to see your partner. It only lets you see yourself. And when a relationship is built on self, it collapses. The truth is, ego thrives on pride. Pride makes you more focused on being right than being kind. It pushes you to protect your image instead of nurturing the bond you've built. Every time you avoid apologizing because of pride, you drive a wedge between you and the other person. Pride will convince you that silence keeps you strong, but silence creates distance. Pride will tell you compromise is weakness, but compromise is actually strength. Pride wants to protect the self, but love requires protecting the os. When pride runs unchecked, the os disappears. One of the most destructive effects of ego is defensiveness. Instead of hearing feedback with openness, you hear it as an attack. You stop seeing the other person's perspective as valuable and start seeing it as a threat. This creates a cycle of arguments where no one wins. Every discussion becomes about scoring points instead of solving problems. The focus shifts from resolution to protection of self, and the longer defensiveness dominates, the harder it becomes to rebuild trust. Because defensiveness doesn't just block problems from being solved, it blocks intimacy from being built. Ego also feeds the need for control in conversations. You interrupt, you talk over, you dismiss because you want to assert your dominance. You want to be the voice that carries more weight. But relationships aren't built on dominance. They're built on respect. Take it back. Respect means creating space for the other person to speak, even when you disagree. Ego can't tolerate that because ego needs the upper hand. But the moment you silence someone to protect your own superiority, you strip the relationship of equality. And without equality, there can never be true partnership. Humility is the antidote to ego. Humility doesn't mean lowering yourself. It means leveling the ground. It means being willing to admit, I was wrong, without letting shame define you. It means recognizing that the relationship matters more than your pride. Humility allows you to apologize quickly, forgive deeply, and listen without interruption. It keeps you from turning every disagreement into a battle. Humility says, I value us more than I value my ego. That mindset creates safety. Safety builds trust. And trust is the fuel that keeps love alive over time. Ego convinces you that vulnerability makes you weak, but the opposite is true. Vulnerability creates connection. When you admit you don't have all the answers, you create space for deeper understanding. When you show that you're hurt instead of hiding behind anger, you open the door for healing. Ego hides behind armor, but love flourishes without it. That the armor may protect you from pain, but it also blocks joy. Vulnerability lets love in while ego locks it out. And the more you let ego run your relationship, the less room you leave for closeness to grow. Another danger of ego is blame. Ego never accepts responsibility. It always points outward. It convinces you that problems are always the other person's fault, never yours. But relationships are never one-sided. When ego blinds you to your role in the dynamic, you lose the ability to improve it. Blame creates walls, while accountability builds bridges. The willingness to say, I played a part in this, is what keeps relationships strong. Ego resists accountability because it feels like weakness. In truth, accountability is one of the greatest displays of strength you can show. Back. Ego also hates change. It wants to stay comfortable, to keep its image intact, even when growth is necessary. That's why so many relationships stagnate. Instead of adapting, take it back, ego clings to old habits and resists new ways of connecting. But growth demands humility. It requires admitting that the way you've done things might not be the best way. Love that lasts isn't rigid, it's flexible. Back. Ego is rigid, unbending, unwilling to adjust. The relationships that thrive are the ones where both people are willing to grow together. Ego cannot grow. It can only protect. Get back. The most dangerous thing about ego is that it isolates. You can be sitting right next to someone yet feel miles apart because ego has taken over. Instead of reaching out, you pull back. Instead of repairing, you retreat. Ego convinces you that protecting yourself matters more than protecting the relationship. But love cannot survive isolation. It requires closeness, connection, and constant nurturing. Every time ego wins, distance grows. Back. Every time humility wins, closeness returns. And the choice between ego and humility is made daily in small moments, not just in big fights. Love is not about proving who's stronger, smarter, or more right. Back. Love is about building something greater than yourself. That requires setting ego aside and choosing humility. It requires valuing connection over competition, truth over pride, presence over performance. When ego runs the show, relationships break. When humility takes the lead, relationships thrive. At the end of the day, you can either feed your ego or you can feed your love. But you cannot do both. Back. The stronger your ego becomes, the weaker your love becomes. The weaker your ego becomes, the stronger your love grows.